Terrific. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much for joining us. And Deb, I'll let you start a little bit by even talking about what your role is at OCF.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Meredith and Leah, and thank you all for welcoming me. I know you've been on this meeting for a while today, so I hope to bring some energy and conversation and support to you in your work. So my name is Deb Yvonne. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm really happy to be here and share some about the Oregon Community Foundation. So about me, my primary geographic focus at the foundation is the Northern Willamette Valley, which OCF defines as Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. I joined OCF's team about a year ago. Prior to that, I was with the Oregon Arts Commission for 13 years, also managing grant programs, but specifically related to arts education and arts and cultural programs. So not new to philanthropy, but still feeling relatively new to the broad and expansive work of the Community Foundation. My title with OCF is a regional program officer. So that means that in addition to being a regional knowledgeable champion for the counties that I primarily serve, I'm part of a statewide team that supports our community grants program, which I will talk a little bit about in this presentation. And I also support several corporate advised funds that provide competitive funding opportunities in and around the Portland Metro and Northern Willamette Valley region. And I define my job as being a liaison and a voice for nonprofits to the foundation. So I really see my role as a program officer being outward facing so that I can listen and learn about the work and challenges and opportunities that nonprofits face, and then bring that perspective back into the foundation so that we can then respond to what we're learning from all of you. So after I talked to Meredith, who gave me a little bit of an overview of the work you've been doing together, I hope to provide you with some resources to apply to your work in grant making, leave time for questions at the end if you'd like to stay and have a conversation. So I'll do a quick introduction to OCF, touch on one of our primary grant programs, and then share some action steps that I hope that you can utilize. So the Oregon Community Foundation is essentially a nonprofit manager of charitable funds. Our endowment is comprised of thousands of funds that are created by individuals, by families, businesses, nonprofits, and government entities. Because we use that collaborative investment strategy, that means that we make grants and awards across numerous issue areas, and we have a wide variety of grant programs that all serve different purposes. The community grants program that I mentioned on the previous slide is our most open and broadly accessible competitive program. So I will give you a little bit more information into that in a moment. One of the important things to know about our community foundation is that one of our jobs is to help donors create funds to support their specific areas of interest. So sometimes that's a geographic region. Sometimes it's a particular topic. We have scholarship funds for certain profiles of students. Essentially, that list of opportunities is as long as our donors' potential interest. So our job is to represent the interests of those donors, just as you honor your donors' intent when they contribute to your organization. And sometimes there are restrictions on that, and sometimes they're unique and quirky. And we have about 2,000 of those. So what that means is that when we fold all of those different philanthropic visions into our work, what comes out is a complex structure that can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming, I think, to applicants. And so that's why our program officers are here, is to help you navigate some of that complexity. And I'll share some tools that hopefully can help smooth that. The other thing that happens because of that diversity of contributors to our funds is that most of our grant making every year is actually not through a competitive process like community grants. It's us managing our donors' intent. And so what this says to me is that this is actually really good news for all of you and your organizations, because we know that a lot of our donors care deeply about the issues of domestic violence, as well as the different geographic regions that you all support. So the first tool I'm going to share with you is actually one to help connect with our donors. So these donor advised funds are a really significant way that OCF supports communities. And this organizational profile tool helps you connect directly to them. So this tool provides you a way to update OCF staff and donors on things that you're working on, current needs that are coming up for you, and also the populations that you're serving. I want to be clear that it is not an application for funding. It is a communication tool, but it allows you to control the pace of communication and a great deal of the formatting of that. So when you log in to the URL at the bottom of this page, you'll see some fields where you can provide information like your mission statement, descriptive information about populations you're serving. And then I don't even know if it has a character count limit, listing of current projects and needs. So that's just a little hot tip that I've seen some very long responses in that current projects and needs section. So I don't know that I recommend that. Our donors probably would appreciate something a little bit more concise, but you have a great deal of flexibility in what you include in that information. So this is a relatively new tool. It's about 1.5 years old. And what we're learning is that profiles that are action-oriented and time sensitive are received really well by our donors. So what I recommend is that once you establish this profile, is that you update it at least every 6 months. And you're certainly welcome to do so more frequently if significant events are occurring for your organization. And that could be something really wonderful that's happening, like, gosh, we just got this wonderful public investment and are now launching our capital campaign. Or it could be something really difficult. Like I had an organization over the summer that had an incident of arson at their food pantry distribution site. And one of the first steps they did was update their profile and say, this happened. We had to shut down for a week, but we're back up and running. And here's how you can help. We need these things. So that is a tangible step that you can take to make your organization more visible, even if you're not yet feeling ready to actually apply for one of our grant programs. And when Meredith told me about the one-pager assignment that you're working on, I immediately thought that this tool could be a wonderful place for you to do just a little copy-paste, light adaptation of a lot of the information that you're including in that document. And that should give you some excellent starting language to build out your profile. And I should say those profiles feed into a database that is searchable by our donors. So a donor can on their own go in and search for who's doing this type of work in this type of region. And it kind of works like a matchmaking program. And our staff also get updates when those profiles are updated. So your communication is going to a couple different places there. Transitioning to our community grants program, this is our key statewide program. This year, 2022, we have just one application deadline, and that is at the end of the month on March 30th. What we're looking for are proposals that engage representatives of our priority populations in project planning, in project implementation, and in reaping the benefits of the work. So one of those priority populations is survivors of domestic violence and or child abuse. So I know that your organizations and your work is already well aligned with the main intent of this funding. That being said, it is a fairly robust application process. And so I would be happy to talk with you about kind of where you are in your program development, in your grant writing confidence, and find out if it's a good fit for you this year. But I do want to just briefly let you know the types of funding that we're offering in this program. Project support, which is either implementation of new work or expansion of existing work. So that's not to fund just your kind of ongoing business as usual. It is for something new. We have capacity building support, which is more focused internally on your organization, things that you need to develop, grow, stabilize yourself so that you can then provide greater service to your community. We do offer general operating support for culturally specific organizations or rural organizations with operating budgets below $250,000. So that's a little bit specific, but I mention it here because I wondered if some of your organizations might be in that position. That general operating support is essentially unrestricted, and you can use it to pay whatever expenses you need to run your organization. So that's a pretty exciting space that we have. And then finally, this year, we're bringing back capital support, specifically for projects with budgets under $500,000. So Meredith also mentioned in our earlier conversation that several of you are looking for support for some space renovations and expansion projects. So I wanted to mention that opportunity, but it does have that $500,000 cap. So it wouldn't be for an entirely new overhaul of a building, but if you're adding on or enhancing facilities, there might be an alignment there. And there is not a cap on the organizational budget size for capital projects, only the project itself. Okay, so in thinking about strong proposals and OCF's priorities, I want to just communicate that we don't want to imply that a competitive application has to hit every single one of our priorities perfectly. We don't expect that, and it's not what we intend. Also, just to know that generally when we review applications, we're not questioning whether a particular project is a good one. Pretty much everything we look at reflects good and important work. However, some of the applications we see are going to be more competitive than others. And so when we face the challenge of limited resources for more projects than we can fund, some of these factors are going to play a role in helping us make those difficult decisions. So in the community grants program this year, we will be prioritizing efforts that focus primarily on one or more of our priority populations, rather than one of those populations being among all of the people who are served. So again, this seems to me like a really strong place of alignment for the work of your organizations, and I wanted to highlight that today. We also are really emphasizing the importance of authentic engagement of people being served in developing the approach to that service that you're offering. Sometimes that's through direct engagement on a staff or a board level. Sometimes it's through volunteer engagement. Sometimes it's through community partnerships. There's a variety of different ways that an organization could successfully demonstrate that engagement. But the example that I often think of from my time working in education programs and philanthropy is an organization would call me and say, hey, we've got this great idea for this project that we want to do in schools. And so will you fund it? And I would say, well, did you ask the schools if they want that project? Because it's not easy to find time during the school day and develop those partnerships and get the relationship with the teacher that you need. So what I'm interested in is the projects where they call and say, you know, we've been talking to the schools, and what we've learned is that this is what is helpful to them, and here's how we're going to do it. And that's the kind of approach that OCF is looking for in really strong proposals in community grants. We also want to see a reasonably strong position for some sustainable community impact, which can include organization financials. We will ask for some financial information. That being said, we certainly recognize that these are really financially stressful times for a lot of nonprofit organizations. And so we're going to be working to balance our role as good stewards of the funds that we grant with the need to accept some financial risk to when addressing these community issues. And there is some narrative space in the application where you can share some of that nuance with us. We have a commitment to addressing inequality in our communities, particularly as it affects those priority populations. To that end, we are going to ask for some demographic information and ask that you share with us some of the intentional efforts that your organization is undertaking to advance DEI. We don't expect perfect answers. We don't expect every organization to have arrived, because in authentic EDI work, there isn't an arrival destination. It is an ongoing journey. So we are looking in our applications to invite you to share information with us about where you are on that journey. And finally, it is your organizations working with the people you serve who are the ones that define what positive and substantive change looks like. And we invite you to share that with us. So for follow-up next steps, another action item, in the OCF environment, you do not need to have a relationship with a program officer in order to apply for most of our grants. We really work to be open and accessible, and you're welcome to contact any of us with questions. But the best use of your time is going to be to connect with a staff member who specifically supports your region. So that's what I've listed here on this slide. Everybody is also on our website, and you can search for their name. So we recommend that you schedule with a program officer to see if there's a good fit before applying, especially if it's your first time in community grants. We don't want you to come up to the application and be so overwhelmed that you give up. We want to have a conversation with you ahead of time and help guide you through that process so we can make sure it's a good fit. And I don't mean that in a screening sense. I really mean that in the most supportive way possible, so that you're using your time well. And sometimes a program officer can help you identify another fund that could be more supportive to your work. We also can provide some feedback on proposals after we've made our decisions. So if you do decide to submit a proposal, and even if it does get funded, but especially if it doesn't, you can reach out afterwards, and the program officer can often give a little bit of context and feedback that might help you develop proposals in the future. And then finally, on the webpage that I've listed on this slide, we do have a recording available of a kind of a potential applicant orientation webinar. We post that as a professional development tool. So that is another resource that we have for you. So these are the 3 hopefully easy and doable action steps that you can take after this meeting, or after you have dinner, after you have a really good night's sleep and a weekend. You can create and or update that organization profile tool that I shared. You can schedule a meeting with a program officer to see if there's potential for community grants this cycle. And then the secret third option that I just threw on this last slide is that we do have a quarterly newsletter specifically targeted towards nonprofits to keep you up to date on what's happening at OCF, upcoming deadlines, and hopefully in the coming months where OCF is going to be in person in the community, and actually where you could meet a program officer easily in person. So that URL is where you can sign up for the newsletter, and we'd love to be able to, I know that's sort of a surface way to stay in touch, but we hope that at least reminds you that we're here and what's coming up for us. That comes out quarterly, so we only do that 4 times a year, and hopefully that feels manageable. So I'll just put this slide up for a hot second so it gets on the recording and people can pause on it. But I will also put this information into the chat, and I am so excited to stop screen sharing and stop talking and see what questions you might have and how I can answer them.